All right, let's just jump right in. We're going to unpack one of the most brutal, drawn-out, and frankly, unbelievable military conflicts in all of history, the Siege of Candia. Yeah, you see that right. 21 years. Just let that sink in for a second. We're not talking about a battle. We're talking about an entire generation. Kids were born, they grew up, and they became adults, all while their city was under constant attack. The sheer scale is just, honestly, it's hard to wrap your head around. And this image here, it gives you a sense of just how massive this whole thing was. This wasn't some quick skirmish, nope. This was a decades-long war focused on this one city. You had the massive land army of the Ottoman Empire throwing everything they had at it, and on the other side, the powerful navy of the Venetian Republic trying to hold on for dear life. So, to get a handle on this epic story, here's how we're going to break it down. We'll look at the standoff itself, then the tiny spark that started this huge fire. We'll dive into the unending siege, see how the fortress finally crumbled, and then talk about the incredible cost of it all. Oh, and stick around because there's a wild secret weapon at the end of this story. Okay, first up, history's longest standoff. Now, it's really important to note that this siege didn't just happen in a vacuum. It was actually the main event, the absolute centerpiece of a much bigger war known as the Cretan War. And yeah, it was a struggle that truly did define an entire generation. So here's the quick rundown. The whole thing kicks off in 1645, when Ottoman forces land on the island of Crete. They spend the next 3 years or so basically mopping up the surrounding areas. But then, 1648, that's when the main event begins, the siege of the capital, Candia. And as you can see, it's not going to end for a very, very long time, all the way until 1669. So you have to ask, right? How on earth does a war that lasts for over 2 decades even get started? Well, believe it or not, this whole massive conflict was ignited by a single provocative act, a pirate raid. You gotta understand the situation back then, in the mid-1600s. You had the Venetian Republic, who used to be the big boss of the Mediterranean, but their power was kind of fading. And then you had the Ottoman Empire, who were basically at the peak of their power and were hungry for more territory. So you have this tension, right? The Venetians knew the Ottomans were just waiting, just looking for any excuse to pounce. And in 1644, they got one. It all starts when these guys, the Knights of Malta, attack a rich Ottoman convoy. Okay, fine. But here's the kicker, the really critical mistake. They sail their stolen loot right into the Venetian-controlled port of Candia. And that was the perfect excuse the Ottomans were waiting for. Next thing you know, 60,000 Ottoman troops are landing on Crete. The war was on. And at first, the Ottomans just stormed through most of Crete pretty easily. But then they got to the capital, Candia, and they just hit a wall. A literal massive wall. This is where the whole conflict grinds to a halt and becomes this incredibly brutal war of attrition. See, Candia wasn't your average city. It was a fortress, a state-of-the-art, absolute monster of a fortress. Its defenses were so good, so advanced, that the Ottomans pounded on it for 16 years with cannons and basically got nowhere. It was a true masterpiece of military engineering for its time. And this setup created this absolutely deadly stalemate. On land, you had the Ottomans, who had the clear advantage. They were attacking nonstop, they even cut off the city's water. But out on the sea, that was Venetian territory. They set up a blockade to try and choke off the Ottoman army's own supply lines. So for years and years, it was just this bloody back and forth. Neither side could land a knockout punch. But a stalemate that brutal, it just can't last forever. Something's gotta give. And after all those years of fighting, the cracks, well, they finally started to show. The fortress was beginning to crumble. And the first domino to fall? Betrayal. A Venetian military engineer, a guy named Andrea Barazzi, switched sides. He defected to the Ottomans. Now this guy knew the fortress like the back of his hand. He told the attackers exactly where to hit, all its weakest spots. A devastating blow. Then came the second blow, a rescue mission that went wrong. It's 1669, and a big French force shows up to save the day. You can just imagine the hope inside the city walls, right? But their attack just completely fizzles out. It fails. And for the defenders, that was just a crushing blow to their morale. And just when you think it couldn't get worse, it does. Total disaster. The French vice flagship, the La Therese, a huge warship with 58 cannons, it accidentally explodes. Just boom. The loss of that ship, all those men, it was a psychological catastrophe. That was it for the French. They were demoralized, defeated, and they just packed up and left. So now their allies are gone, their fortress has been compromised from the inside, there was nothing left to do. The defenders of Candia finally surrendered. But this was not a clean victory. The price for this city was absolutely devastating for everyone involved. Just look at this contrast. On one side, you have the mighty fortress that held out for over 2 decades, and on the other, the quiet, somber reality of the end, as the last Christian defenders are allowed to leave with whatever they could carry. And the numbers here are just mind-boggling. After all that fighting, the Venetians were left with just 3,600 defenders. But look at the Ottoman losses. Nearly 120,000 men. Yes, the Ottomans took the city, but at what cost? A victory this expensive, it was so ruinous that it actually helped speed up the long-term decline of their entire empire. And you have to feel for the guy in charge, the Venetian commander, Francesco Morosini. He's the one who had to make the impossible call to surrender. And get this, he did it without getting the okay from his bosses back in Venice. That decision made him a really controversial figure for years, even though he probably saved the lives of every last person left in that city. But we're not done. This story has one last, absolutely shocking twist. Something that was hidden away in the Venetian archives for hundreds of years. A secret plan, a weapon of last resort that the defenders had ready to go, but never used. It really makes you wonder, right? You're facing complete and total destruction. You've only got a few thousand people left. What line are you willing to cross to survive? Okay, this is just wild. The Venetians had a plan for biological warfare. They had created a deadly liquid from the organs of plague victims, ready to be deployed against the Ottoman army. And get this, nobody knew about it. Historians only found the documents in 2015. Now, fun fact, if you've seen the show Silicon Valley, a character actually mentions this, but the real story here is that this weapon wasn't just an idea, it was prepared and ready to go, and thankfully, it was never used. And the actual documents from the Venetian archives, they say it all right there. The plan was in place, the weapon was ready, but for some reason we'll probably never know, they didn't pull the trigger. A terrifying line in warfare was approached, but they decided not to cross it. And so that leaves us with one final pretty chilling question to think about. What if they had? How would that have changed everything? Not just the siege or the war, but maybe the entire history of warfare itself. Yeah, it's a haunting thought to end on.